that did not interrupt or harm the environment. All of us want two things. Every person in this debate I've talked to says they want to have preservation of this incredibly glorious inheritance and richness that we have, this heritage that we have, and that they also want to have jobs for their families. They want to be able to actually live here. And I don't think there's much disagreement about those two objectives, and I think they are not competing objectives. In fact, I know you got a question, sir, but let me say one thing before you do. If I had a marker here, I could draw the old XY axis, and many of you have heard me say this. If the Y-axis was better jobs, more revenue for the economy, and the X-axis was better protection of the environment and preservation of our rich heritage, I believe that we are far too often getting solutions that are down here at the intersection of that XY axis. They're low for jobs and they're low for protecting the economy. Protecting the environment. I believe out here there are solutions that are better for jobs and better for the environment. And maybe I'm wrong, but we've been starting to prove that on case after case, and that's where I think we ought to go. Yes, sir.
Thank you. I'd like to pose discussion about the Pilots Bill of Rights Act 2, Senate bill. It's also a companion bill in the House. And I'd like to try to elicit your support for that. Just presenting quick points is that the bill deals with medical reform and also FA policies, which actually I believe are due process restricted by the Constitution. And I'd like to point out that aviation is very, very important in Idaho. Aviation in general is in trouble because of regulatory costs, some of which are proposed or driven by the FAA, some of which are just fact. And the access to aviation, we are the premier location access to aviation to the backcountry. It brings a lot of money and jobs to the state, and we really, really need support as a co-sponsor and to try to get your colleagues to get this thing through. We got the Bill of Rights 1, which started the process. Unfortunately, it did not go far enough. The FAA draconian, they're dragging their feet, they're just stonewalling you guys.
Now, correct me if you know, I sponsored the first bill, right?
I believe you, yes.
I'm pretty sure I did. I've been a strong advocate for our backcountry air pilots and frankly for aviation in the state of Idaho over the years. And I know that I sponsored one of the bills. When you said it was number 2 that I might have sponsored that, the 2 explained it to me. I apologize, I'm not familiar with the details of that bill. I know you contacted my office yesterday, so I'm pretty sure that one of my staff is writing a memo right now. And I promise you that I will take a close look at it. I'm pretty sure that I'll be very supportive of it because I've been very supportive all the way along on these kinds of issues. So I apologize that I'm not up to speed enough to answer you specifically right now, but I will tell you that we'll look at that very closely. Yes, sir.
I read somewhere that the fires are treated differently as a natural disaster.
You're right.
Hurricanes, floods, tornadoes. And that it just seems wrong. We ship our money down to bail out New Orleans, and Tornado Alley. And
you should come and testify to Congress.
You know.
Let me, I couldn't have planted a better question, so thank you very much for asking that. There's actually a bill to fix that, and I am the Republican lead sponsor of it, and Senator Ron Wyden from Oregon is the Democrat lead sponsor. Here's the issue. We fight fires every year, and over the years we've gotten to where we have been worse and worse at getting it resolved with the budget that Congress provides. And so what happens is not Congress, but the Forest Service and the BLM on the wildland fire, on the BLM fires, have had to take money out of their other budgets in order to fight fires. Well, what are those other budgets? Those are the budgets that they would have used to go in and treat the land and deal with it properly so that the risk of fire was reduced and that the environment was protected and preserved. In other words, the proper land management activities that they wanted and should be engaged in. We call this fire borrowing. And so what they do is they borrow from their budget in order to fight the fires, which means they don't do the protective actions that they should have done to have fewer fires the next year. And what we end up having is bigger and bigger fire budgets every year with the same level of congressional funding. So Senator Wyden and one other fact, and this one's a startling fact. Most fires, we also have a pretty good understanding of fire these days, and some fires are not that harmful and some are. Some fires become catastrophic, and everybody then agrees that these are dangerous, bad fires. They are catastrophes. 1% of our fires pretty much falls into that category. But 30% of the firefighting budget goes into fighting that 1% of the fires. And so Senator Wyden and I said, look, when a fire gets to the point where it is a natural disaster, it is a catastrophe, in our mind, no more distinguishable from a tidal wave than a flood, or any of the other, a hurricane, or the other kinds of natural tragedies or catastrophes that can happen, which we budget for under our natural disaster budget. If when a fire gets into that zone, then let's fight it with that budget. We are prepared, we have already put money in the budget away for it. This wouldn't, both the Office of Management and Budget at the White House and the Congressional Budget Office have said that our bill would not cost any money because the money's already sitting in a fund to fight natural disasters. And we've built sufficient cushion in there that we could fight forest fires, the bad ones, at the same time. And so we put that bill forward. It has been supported, I think, as broadly, if not more broadly, than any bill I've seen in Congress. There are, I think literally, I don't think I'm overstating it, around 1,000 different groups. From the hardcore multiple use groups to the hardcore environmental protection groups, they're all supporting our bill. Who's opposing our bill? And I'm not going to name names, but there's a couple budget folks in the Congress who are not convinced yet that it won't cost money. In other words, we're going to fight these fires, and we're going to spend the money to fight them, and we always rebuild the BLM and the Forest Service budgets afterwards, so after they didn't get their work done, we give them some money to rob next year. But the bottom line is, it isn't going to cost any money, but we're literally fighting that one issue in Congress right now.
I'll just tell them we won't fund any of their disasters.
You know what? I've actually tried. We were working on that.
I mean, I think there'd be enough.
You know, if they want their hurricanes funded, then maybe they can fund our fires. Yes, ma'am.
I want to thank you for your support of the Forest Coalitions. I sit on both the Fayette Forest Coalition and the Creek Pine South Fork Coalition. And thank you for letting Brian participate because he's been a real treasure.
He's a great guy.
He's been great to work with. Going from that, the Boulder White Cloud Wilderness area is going to come up for vote soon. And I'm on the steering committee with the Idaho Recreation Council, and I know we voted to support the wilderness bill as it's moving forward. And we're really in a pinch, and personally I feel pinched because we're between wilderness designation that can have defined boundaries and prescriptions versus national monument designation of a much larger scale with no guidelines really as to what may happen moving forward. I feel that the Sawtooth National Recreation Area was a very workable solution for good management in those areas to provide a balance of both protection of the environment and encouraging recreation, reasonable recreation in those areas. But we're obviously moving beyond that. I think the Antiquities Act needs to be reformed so that it's not hanging over us every time a group wants to push for additional wilderness designation. And one of the things I'm concerned about with wilderness designation too is I know there's at least one group has filed a notice of intent to sue prescribed burns in wilderness areas. They feel that we should just let Mother Nature take her course. And to me, that means, you know, living here in the Payette National Forest, where 70% of the forest is burned in 21 years. If we leave it up to Mother Nature, lightning strikes and years of extreme drought will give us large, uncharacteristic, catastrophic wildfires. And I think that prescribed burns in wilderness areas are very important to help protect areas outside the wilderness areas, but also I've seen the effects of wildfire, and I've seen the effects of repeat burns in the same areas, and that is catastrophic. And it will set vegetation back 100 years, and even starting to revegetate in some of those areas. So I'm hoping as you're crafting this bill that there'll be some consideration for being able to manage at least with prescribed fires, since we lose basically all of our other management tools with the wilderness designation, and also some reform of the Antiquities Act.
Well, first of all, I appreciate you're very informed. Not everybody's as informed on these kinds of issues as you are. I agree with you, and I'm going to support this bill. And I agree with you that the Antiquities Act needs to be amended. I personally don't agree and don't believe that any president should have the authority just by the stroke of a pen to essentially designate management decisions on land. Getting back to my earlier discussion about having those decisions be made in a collaborative fashion is what I believe we need to be more moving toward. And so I've actually introduced legislation to prohibit the president from having the authority to make an Antiquities Act designation unless Congress approves it. And like I said, I do support the act. Since Senator Risch is the one who sits on the committee that's drafting this bill, and so if he were here, he might be able to answer your question about fire management. I just don't know what the terms of that bill are, as if any, as they deal with that issue.
I know I made the comment to Simpson, but
So the best I'm going to have to say to you, sort of like I said to this gentleman here, I'm going to have to go back and study that a little bit. I personally believe in managing fires the same way we manage the rest of the collaborative decisions that we make or should be making with regard to the management of our land, and that is letting people of all different perspectives work in a collaborative way to make determinations about how, when, and where we implement different aspects of firefighting policy. As you know, we did have we've got a lot of successful collaborative efforts underway now, and you just mentioned two that you're working with. The Clearwater Basin Collaborative that's going on there in North Idaho is an example of where we've been able to reach quite a few decisions about timber management, and that involves fire management. We haven't resolved everything, we haven't ironed out everything, but we're making progress. And again, I know I'm repeating myself, but it's that insistence on being sure that people who live close to the issue are consulted in and allowed to participate in the collaborative decision-making model that I think works best.
there needs to be some way to protect them too, though, from challenges from groups that choose not to participate in the collaboratives, but
You're right.
you know,
That's a big issue.
make their money by lawsuits.
That's a very big issue because
Absolutely.
litigation is one of the things that's driving a lot of conflict, and in my opinion, a lot of less than effect. Remember I told you that a lot of decisions are down near the intersection of the economy and the environment? I think a part of that is that the litigation drives decision down both directions. And I think if we could get more toward collaboration and further away from litigation solutions, we could get there. Now, the problem that we run into is we don't have the votes yet to create if I had the authority to draft a bill and make it law, my bill would basically put into law the authority for collaborative decision-making to happen. Today, we have to kind of wrench it in there and get past the litigation and get past the other aspects of management that go along with either state or federal law that the federal and state agencies are bound by as they manage. And so we do need to have a fix to that. We really do. I don't know how soon we'll get there.